aspects of that. Tim, do you have other questions on
Yeah,
the
I'm
co-founder?
just, so how long, or when did you first know you needed a co-founder? And what pushed you to the point where you wanted to make that commitment to have a co-founder?
So I knew before I started Grantable that I wasn't doing this to be on my own. When
Mm-hmm.
my nonprofit that I started in Seattle, that was a pretty difficult experience for me. I mean, when I started it, I think I was 26 or 25. I hadn't ever done anything even remotely close to that. And it was both a really vibrant, captivating idea that a lot of people contributed to in different ways. But then on the back end, partially because I was an inexperienced fundraiser, we were always just about broke, and so it was a financially really difficult time for me, for the organization. We just kind of never really had the resources we needed, and I was always relying on volunteers for just about everything that we were doing. And so what I was constantly experiencing was people taking on responsibility, but then sort of handing it back. And what happens as the venture grows is there's more and more responsibility being handed out and handed back. And so I was just so stretched thin and so worn out by the end when the venture didn't take off, and I was at it for 5 years. So working other jobs, just trying every possible way to belt tighten and grit it out. And
Yeah.
I would have done it very differently. But one of the lessons that I drew from that was, gosh, if you really want something to be durable and resilient, and fun and enjoyable, you know, I really wanted a partner. I wanted a team. I wanted this to be an experience. It's kind of like, trudging up a mountain on your own. I mean, some people maybe do that, but to me, it becomes fun if you've got a good friend with you and you're experiencing the hardship together. It becomes stories, it becomes laughs, it becomes,
In different
meaningful.
sides of that, to see it from just different, I see it this way, I see it that way, even though you're doing the exact same thing at the same time.
Yeah,
That's cool to hear.
absolutely. So, in summary, I've had a lot of time where, not by choice, but maybe because I wasn't putting out the right energy, or I wasn't creating the space for somebody to plug in, just because I was still kind of learning how to build organizations, how to work on projects. But I had a lot of time where I felt very on my own. And I
Mm-hmm.
knew that didn't feel good. I knew that didn't leave me in a good place, or the work. So from the very beginning, I was hoping that there would be somebody coming along that I could link up with. And it didn't happen right away, as I was saying. And it didn't necessarily come from like an intentional source. But I think I was always open to it. I was always hoping for it. I was always trying to learn from my mistakes in the past, and trying to become a different kind of collaborator to make that partnership happen.
Well, I mean, it's really, really important. I appreciate you showing, a vulnerable side of yourself and telling that story, because I mean, it is really, really important to have that co-founder. A lot of, if you're doing the accelerator thing, that's really important to have a co-founder. From an investment side, investors want to see that you have a co-founder, and a lot of times, you being able to sell Grantable to establish that co-founder, that's almost your first customer. And if you can't sell your vision and your company to find a co-founder, then that's the first sign that something is off. So that's why I wanted to spend a little bit more time talking about that, because it is really, really important. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
Did you get feedback from accelerators or from investors? I'm assuming that you're raising, because you've gone through some accelerators. Was that an important piece that people were looking for? Was a co-founder?
I mean, a lot of folks just post it out there. I mean, it's if you talk about like YC, they're always saying, we prefer groups with co-founders. So, I mean, I think it's almost common knowledge at this point. We are just about to go after our first outside funding. So I think already just the way that some of the investors we've been building relationships with are responding to the news that I found a co-founder, I think you can kind of tell that it's like,
awesome.
oh, that's the Grantable is now way more resilient. Grantable is now
100%.
way stronger, more likely to be able to weather any storms that are coming. So I think that's being felt. Nobody's kind of said it explicitly to me, but I've asked for that help. So a lot of times I've said, I'm looking for collaborators. I'm looking for, there's room in this enterprise for other folks to come in. So I've always been pretty open about that. So yeah, I think it's been mutual. There's nobody's kind of challenged me and said, hey,
that's great.
Have you? Yeah.
Good on you.
When it comes to the bubble aspect of it or the no code aspect of it, obviously you built what sounds like your V1, your alpha, maybe even your beta version from something like a no code tool like a bubble.io. A couple of our previous guests have as well. I'm interested to hear how the new co-founder who is technical comes in and receives something like that, and is it ultimately like that the bubble stuff becomes trash? Does he build off of the bubble? Does he start from zero? Like how does that happen? Because it's my understanding that bubble is its own kind of language, right? And then you now have someone else who's a full stack developer. He might be writing in who knows what. Is he going to restart from there? And is there conversations there? Like how does that whole thing go down?
Well,
because
it's a good question. I won't speak for all scenarios. I'll just tell you what happened with us. It worked out because I had built the first tool in Bubble, and then I was pivoting to a marketplace. So we didn't really have the need to translate what I had built into the new software because we needed something different. So Robert was actually seeing me build the marketplace in Bubble and was like, oh, wait a minute, like why don't we do this my way? And I was more than
so
happy.
It kind of started from scratch again because of that, because you're building a new tool at that point.
Yes, but what I will say about Bubble and the whole experience, having spent, I don't know how much time, hundreds, maybe, certainly hundreds of hours in Bubble myself, it taught me sort of how to understand the layers of software as far as like from the back end, the database, all the way to the front, and how these things are sort of working. So that's helped bridge the gap between, I think I'm like a semi-technical founder now. So I'm not at zero when I'm talking to Robert. And more than that, I wasn't having to just describe what I was talking about. He actually went into my tool and clicked around and looked at it. And, he gained an understanding of when he considered me as a potential co-founder, right? I mean, he came in, but like, he doesn't just want to jump into any scenario. He's now seeing, oh, Phil kind of gets software. He might not be able to write code like I do, but we can communicate conceptually in a way that maybe is different than I would have been able to without that experience.
I would imagine Tim would agree with this. One of the hardest things that non-technical founders have is and who want to build some sort of app or some sort of software play is understanding the layers to a platform, and how even just general users not understanding that, hey, it's not just putting up a button there. That button has 17 different features actually, and 27 different layers, and like it's not as easy. People are like, oh, I'm just going to build the next Facebook. It's like, okay, well, Facebook is 18 years old. It has how many thousands of users, or how many thousands of employees after how many, like, it's just like, that's kind of an impossible thing. Like so kudos for you for figuring that out.
Yeah, I think it was a great step. It allowed me to just start taking the idea out of my mind, putting it out there for people to try and use. I was using my first prototype when I was still writing grants for people. I would put all of my clients' existing proposals into the tool I built, and I'd be able to spin up a draft for them in no time, and they were just like, "Wow, how do you work so fast?" And I was like, "Well, I'm just using this thing." So I mean, it's been cool. There's skills that I still use. I mean, I still have to do some of our design, our graphic design sometimes here in the early going. So it's all really, you put it in your toolkit, and then, it's there for forever. And so I think it's been really valuable. I think Bubble is also changing, growing in terms of what it's capable of. So I think there are already companies that are just launching fully on Bubble. That's not the direction that we're going to go in, and I think we have specific reasons for that. And leveraging Robert's incredible abilities and experience himself, it just makes sense for us too.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about, so this is another thing that you did right. If you think about how much time or how much money you would have spent to pay a developer to do the things that you were able to figure out in Bubble, I mean, you saved, you learned so much. You were able to establish an MVP and kind of prove, validate your idea. And then once you know that you've validated, then you can take that next step. And then someone like Robert can come in and then start to build things from a full stack point of view. But I mean, you've saved a ton of time. You validated, you got the MVP, and now you're off to the races. So that's what current founders or people that are thinking about founding a startup, that's the approach that they can take. And investors are okay with that. They would much rather you validate the idea before you try to raise a ton of money from an investor without validation first.
Well, an outside developer is going to do I'm bashing a lot of outside developers, but I mean, like, having that outside team can be such a catastrophic, it's just so difficult to see those things succeed. And like, people are like, oh, I'm just going to hire this, overseas company. It's like, there's not a lot of, from things that I've seen, that have great use cases or case studies of success from that, because there's so many moving layers of that. It's like, hey, once it gets out, by the way, then people want to change stuff, and you got to wait 6 weeks because you don't have an internal team. I mean, it's just, it can be a disaster. And people don't want to hear that, but that's the truth.
If I can add something for folks, in my position listening, so before I knew of Bubble, I actually, did a mock-up of what I was talking about. I don't remember, in Canva or something, just like a PowerPoint kind of thing. And I showed a friend of mine who's a software engineer. And what I think Bubble allows is for not much more work than just sketching out what it looks like. I mean, you have to learn how to link stuff up, but for not too much more, you could actually have something that has action to it. So exactly, just taking that idea out and not needing a developer from the very get-go, I think is a powerful tool. I'll say there's a side to be wary of, though, especially if you're on your own, like I was. It can feel very safe and it can feel like you're making progress and doing something if you just spend hours and hours in there, modifying the color of a button, or, oh, should it have, rounded corners, or should it be square? And I made that mistake, when other stuff was scary, when there wasn't progress happening, or I didn't want to share this out and get feedback or potential criticism. You can always just go back to your Bubble and make it a little bit better. And I just caution people, if you find yourself, suddenly missing meals because you're in there, just building out more and more features. That's the challenging side of Bubble, is you can go so fast, so inexpensively, but not realize that you're actually, skipping over testing or getting feedback. So I will just say that was something I had to pull back on, was, I can spend all day in Bubble. I can do it myself. Wow, I'm so empowered. But then you run the risk of being on your own, being in your own little, headspace, and not really letting people interact with what you're doing. So I would say that's the drawback. Whereas if you were working with a developer, you're really thinking twice about, do I really need this button because it's going to cost me, this much money to do? Do I really need this? And that inhibition goes away. So I will just caution people out there, get into it, but then you now need to create those feedback loops and get it out to other people who will give you feedback on what you're doing, because you can move so much more quickly on your own.
They're a 10-year-old business, Bubble. I just did some quick Crunchbase. I didn't realize how 250 plus employees. They've raised $107 million. I didn't realize they were good for them.
It's really cool. It's a beautiful project, and I think it's really well-meaning, hopeful, aspirational people at that company, and it's cool. It is just really cool what you can do with it.
Well, and it took a while for them to find their product market fit, and there is this from a developer side. I mean, everyone always would bash the whole WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get movement, and now it seems like it's starting to take hold. So yeah, good for them.
Timing is really such an outsized factor in everything that we do.
I've been directly involved within our entrepreneurial community for years. And the most common question I get is, Tim, I want to get involved, but I don't know what events I should attend. Well, Startwheel eliminates that pain point because we consolidate all the events you should attend into a single calendar. Now you'll be in the know and see where to spend your time. Gone is the need to search multiple websites and calendars. Just head to startwheel.org and see for yourself. That's startwheel.org.